Hey everybody, welcome to Moon Astrology. I am Chase Butiche, psycho-spiritual consultant and astrologer. And in the next couple days, we are having a new moon in Libra. So I want to get into that, talk about what that means, talk about the collective of ourselves, how things are changing, how things are evolving. So Libra traditionally is, it's ruled by Venus. It is the lover, the artist, the peacemaker. And generally the way Libras are is they kind of are like peace at any price, harmony for the sake of harmony. They're the diplomats of the zodiac. They're the lawyers. They are the scales, right? Me having an Aries moon, I feel like in my life, I kind of can get frustrated with Libras because I'm like, I have a bunch of Mars, power Mars energy that's like more aggressive. And that's what's interesting is that right now, this new moon is it's opposing Mars. And currently, you guys have probably all heard, Mars has been in retrograde for the past couple weeks. What does that mean? What does that mean? And why is it opposing? Because Mars has been highlighting and really engaging us in the past month or so. And, anytime a planet's in retrograde, it's really like a review period. It's kind of like, it's going more internal. It's kind of going over. It's not necessarily bad. It's just a time when it's going back. It's reviewing its choices. So for Mars, Mars is kind of this really intense energy of like impetuous, assertive, aggressive. For it to be in retrograde, it's kind of reviewing where in our lives maybe we have held back when we should have, pushed forward. Mars really rules courage. It rules dynamic energy. It rules the warrior archetype. So for this to be opposing the moon in Libra in Aries, so Mars is in Aries where it naturally belongs, the moon's in Libra. What does this mean exactly? Well, what I believe that it means is really, it's confronting us with having to really begin to look at the truth of our relationships. Libra rules relationships. That's one of the fundamental pieces of it. And really, our relationships in our lives, when we start to get really real about our relationships, are a barometer for the way we treat ourselves. So the way our closest people in our lives treat us is really a barometer for the way that we treat ourselves. And having to come to terms with that, this is really like the shadow work, the shadow element around astrology, around when we're starting to really look at these situations, these energies in our life and saying, okay, Libra represents this, I know Libras, but also how do I take this inward? How do I see everything in my life is actually a reflection of the way that I actually treat myself? And so the reason I'm speaking to this currently is because I have been going through my own period of really getting real about some of my relationships in my life and the way that certain people have treated me and that I've allowed them to treat me. And it's it's been a time for me specifically of deep truthing around the way that there are certain dynamics of relationships in my life have played out. So, the way that this is working out, we're activating Mars. There's an activation of Mars this month, which means it's activating our personal willpower, our courage, self-determination, assertiveness, aggression. What we can do with this energy as it's connected to Libra is we can take these energies of Mars and pull these together when confronted with our closest relationships, because I feel like if you are like me and you are watching this, you're highly empathic, you're highly sensitive, and the closer someone is to you, the harder it is to come to terms with the way that the dynamics of the energy of the relationship. And the way that this has worked out for me, especially with men in my life, but with some women, it's been a narcissistic empath energy that I've held in my life, where it's really the way that I've framed narcissistic relationships has been it's a lack of receptivity So it's kind of this constant pushing energy without being able to take in the other person. So the energy is not flowing, it's not fluid, it's not reciprocal. It's a dominating energy. And so what ends up happening is that the empath ends up being the person that is constantly serving the narcissist, while both of them are just feeding into deeper levels of unworthiness that is really the fundamental foundational feeling. And so what's been happening for me lately, really in a very deep way, is I've been confronting this pattern that I feel like as a guide, a spiritual guide, I've like helped people through this. And the deeper I've gone with myself as I've opened to new relationships that are incredibly nourishing for me, and confronted ones where I in some way was allowing myself to be subtly, ever so subtly, in an imbalance where there was kind of a level of psychic abuse, where this energy of never fully being seen and constantly overgiving. And so I really foundationally believe that this is connected to the patriarchal world culture that has dominated our system for however many thousands of years, that is in the process of disseminating, dissolving, dying, right? And so as this system around us begins to die, it's really, really time for us as light workers, guides, psychics, intuitives, empaths, to begin to really, really, really look at our own darkness, our places within the self where we have allowed abuses of power to affect us on a very, very deep level, and begin to reconcile with those. And what we can begin to do, especially with this new moon, is activate our inner Kali motherfucking witch power and begin to say no more. No more. And what that means is that we begin to come to terms with the way that the energy archetypes have played out in our own lives in terms of relationships. So this is really, really, really hard when you when you're really sensitive. You can feel the way that you can feel how much it hurts to say no to somebody. And what ends up happening as the culture of the imbalanced patriarchal world culture, the feminine energy, which we all have at men and women of the planet, is a receptive energy, right? And it's an energy that's caretaking. It's an energy that's given. This has been attributed, because of our dualistic nature on this planet Earth, which is now dissolving, to women specifically. So women have had these caretaker energies, myself included, where it's like our sense of worth. But I'm not saying this doesn't exist for men, because I know it does. But our sense of worth comes from giving. And so to actually receive within this paradigm is actually painful. And so to begin to reconcile with this energy is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And it takes the highest level of courage. It takes the highest level of power to begin to, because what you are doing with the self actively is you are saying, I no longer am willing to allow myself to be put down by fear. It's really having to face the deepest, most uncomfortable waves. We've neglected ourselves in the name of peace and overgiving. And this is the shadow of Libra. And so in order for the energies of the world to become more balanced and really to become more harmonious, what needs to happen is that we need to begin to look at the places in our lives where we haven't wanted to admit to ourselves the uncomfortable levels of overgiving, and also the inability to say no. This is really, really, really real. And I think this is where all the rage and all the anger and all the hatred that is happening in our world right now is because there's been this trespass over and over and over and over again of systems and energies that do not respect no. And I recently experienced this in a close relationship where it was like, it was part of the game of the relationship where I would say no, and then that boundary would get crossed. And then I would say no again, and then that boundary would get crossed. And it was kind of like this game, but underneath of it, every time the boundary got crossed, it was like it ate away a little bit more at my own levels of self-worth and self-confidence. And it fed into my fear that if I actually said no, would I be absolutely like the deepest levels of loneliness, of solitude? Would I ever actually be with somebody that could see me? These are the things, these are these deep shadow levels of things that we don't want to admit to ourselves in the name of overgiving, when actually underneath it all, there's this deep fear that is controlling us. And it's controlling us. And the more we allow a no to become trespassed, every single time, it's another way that we become less and less powerful. So at this point in time, I'm gonna actively ask all of you to begin to fundamentally begin to respect and nurture yourself when it comes to what is right for you around your closest relationships. And I mean, this really goes to family members, this goes to lovers, this goes to friends. Where do you find yourself overgiving time and time again to a point that feels uncomfortable for the sake of peace? Because these are the subtle trespasses of a dominant patriarchal world culture that has infiltrated into our psychic energetic lives. And in order for this entire system to become recalibrated, we have to begin to recalibrate it within ourselves, which means we have to actively begin to take responsibility for the places and pieces and people in our lives that are walking over a boundary that we have allowed them to cross time and time again. So the only way to get really through this is to begin to fundamentally allow yourself to have not only the courage, but the power to begin to allow yourself to access the power that does reside within you, that holds the absolute and fundamental no. Where is the line within the self? Where is it? Can you find it? Does it exist? There must be, because this is where the line of where we create our sense of self, of our sense of self-worth. This is how all new life forms develop, really, from this place. This is where we develop our sense of integrity, our sense of personal power, our sense of freedom and self-respect, is when we begin to draw that line. So the other piece I want to share of the astrology is that there is a T-square that is happening. It's a tension aspect between the moon, Pluto, the ruler of death, rebirth, the foundational and deepest energies of annihilation and rebirthing, and Mars. So the absolute energy of fucking power, warrior energy, assertive aggression. So these are like combusting. And so the release point, it's a triangle that is very tense within the self, right? And it's in Libra, it's in, and it's all in these different signs. So the way that this is gonna release is through Cancer. Cancer, what is Cancer? The divine feminine, the subconscious. It rules the moon. It rules our deepest self. It rules our truth, but it fundamentally rules how we nurture ourselves and becoming very honest with ourselves around what truly nurtures us and what doesn't. And if there ever was a time in human history to get really real with yourself about this, this is it. This is it, my friends. So, yeah. And in addition to all that is happening, we have these really interesting aspects on this new moon. We have this Uranus, the planet as psychic, revolutionary, lightning, electric energy opposing Mercury. Uranus is really the higher octave of Mercury. So, and then we have Venus, the planet of love and beauty, opposing Neptune, the higher octave of Venus, which really rules interconnected kind of Jesus Christ unity consciousness. All of these are happening on the new moon. Everything I just said. What that means is that we are getting charged with and pushed, because all of these are just they're inviting, they're charging, they're activating the spiritual awakening that is happening on this planet and happening within ourselves. And the only way to awaken truly is to go into our own darkness and begin to foundationally and fundamentally allow ourselves to utter the truth of certain situations, people, and relationships. Our relationships are a barometer for the way we treat ourselves. The way we treat ourselves dictates the quality of our life. So I just want to invite you all to fundamentally begin to work with that energy, engage with that energy. Ask yourself this month, where in my life, in what relationships, where do I feel betrayed, abandoned? Where is the line constantly being crossed? Constantly being crossed in the most subtle and minute ways. Because maybe from the outside, the relationship seems great, but there's a deeper feeling that you have within the self that something is imbalanced, and it's beginning to allow yourself to follow that intuitive, psychic, spiritual awareness, to honor it. That is your shadow, that is your power, that is your primordial, foundational, intuitive, feminine energy within the self that is actually what is emerging right now and what is helping heal and activate the spiritual awakening on this planet. So I love you all, and I just want to offer that piece today. And please email me if you have any questions or you need any guidance with this. This is my shit. This is what I've been going through myself. So yeah. All right. Have a wonderful new moon, and I'll see you soon.